Right, so on that smooth note, welcome to 2023 and our first call. So happy New Year, everyone. First call of the new year, and we have a guest speaker lined up, as you're probably all aware. So we'll start with an update from Peter Lowe, who I think most, if not everyone on the call knows from DNSFilter, who's going to talk about the irony of blocking trackers and people want privacy, but at what cost? Some of the issues to do with tracking and so on. So Peter will talk about that, and then we'll touch on some recent developments, including some news which was sort of hot, sort of breaking the last few days before Christmas. So we'll talk about DNS4 EU amongst other things, and then with time for AOB at the end, all things being equal. But without further ado, let me stop sharing and ask Peter, do you want to...
Yeah,
everything. Welcome. Happy New Year. Thanks for volunteering to go on the first call of the new year. So can I hand over to you walk through?
Yeah, let me just find I've got too many windows open. You're gonna have to forgive me, everyone, because I'm a bit sick at the moment, and I spent the weekend in bed trying to. Oh my god, I have too many windows. Where's the one with the slides on?
This is the point where my machine sort of froze about a minute before the hour.
As everyone can see, this is a smooth start to the year, as Andrew was pointing out.
We are a well-oiled machine, all of us, clearly.
Yeah, I know. It's a couple of weeks out of practice, and everything goes to goes to hell. I have it open, but it's not showing. Oh, here we go. Yep, there we go. It's yeah. Can you see that? Okay. Yep,
I can see your slides, Peter.
Oh no, let's not share it. I will present to you. Here we go. Okay. All right. So let me start at the beginning. Yes, here we go. The title slide. Right. Thank you, Andrew, for messing up your intro so that mine wasn't too bad either. Thank you. This is a presentation I did at the Ad Filtering Dev Summit, which is held by a company called IO that make the popular AdBlock Plus extension. They do a bunch of other things as well to do with, they have their own ad network, and they're a little bit controversial because they have this thing called acceptable ads, but they do a conference every year. They invite people from Google and Firefox and other, researchers and stuff. So I did this presentation about a thing that happened with my little block list. So for anyone who's not familiar with me, my name is Peter Lowe. I am the principal security researcher at DNSFilter, and I work on making DNSFilter's threat protection better. Is kind of my main goal and work. I also run a block list for ads and trackers. That's fairly popular. I started it many years ago when I discovered that I could run a local name server and make it the master for like doubleclick.net, and it was just points it to a black hole IP address, and found it was an easy way of blocking ads. It was quite easy. Quite an effective way of doing it, and you can be lazy because you don't have to add each individual domain. I actually got my job at DNSFilter because of this block list. The DNSFilter uses my block list to classify domains as advertising, and they reached out, years ago and said, "Hey, we just want to make sure we're doing what we can to support you." And I kind of joked. I was like, you can sign up on Patreon if you like, or unless you've got any remote jobs going. And it turns out they did. So yeah, that's how I got my job. I do have a terrible Twitter habit. That's kind of morphing into a Mastodon habit lately. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, that's me. I do joke that, so I don't make any money from my block list, apart from, something for some patrons, like a couple of dollars a month. But I did finally get a job out of it, which is, so it's all worthwhile. So the list itself includes, it's basically just a list of domains which are used for ads and trackers. There's a couple of other things on there as well, like some nasty things that I come across, but not very much. It's basically so my policy is anything that's primarily used as an ad server or as a tracker. It's run just by me, so I'm the what's the term, benevolent dictator. But it's fairly consistent. I try to stick to my own principles, my own rules, or the documented policy. I only add the highest part of a domain. As I said, to be lazy, I add doubleclick.net instead of add.uk.doubleclick.net and add2.uk.doubleclick.net. So you can view the list in a ton of different formats. Sorry, I've got to try and throw it here. So you can use it as view it as like a host file or a proxy pack file, or for use in Little Snitch. One of the most popular uses is in uBlock Origin. So it's used by default in uBlock Origin. It's enabled by default, and but it's also able to be enabled in AdBlock Plus and Pi-hole and other things as well, which kind of have it listed as an optional block list. It is a terrible website. If you actually go to look at the site itself, I haven't updated it in about 15 years, I think, and it wasn't very good to start with. So it's I make no claims as a web designer, but the information is good, and the data on the actual list is quite it's good. It's checked automatically every week, so it's very clean, and I personally added every single entry on the list. One of the things about my list is that it's not massive like some of the ones out there, but each one is verified by me personally. So yeah. So a couple of things that I wanted to note about this. Again, the audience was slightly different when I presented this, but yeah, I never really planned for my list to be popular. It really was just something I made for myself. That I stuck online and other people started using. And I think because it was sort of consistent and fairly good quality, that other people started picking up. And it's been around for 25 years now. And yeah, so I think that's basically the reason. But just do something for 25 years and it might get popular. I don't have anyone to answer to, which is good and bad. So I don't have to, if I put something on the list, it's entirely up to me. Yeah, it's good for me, and it's good in that I can do things quickly, but it's also bad because people might not agree with my decisions. I'm not really sure how many people use it overall. I think it's something like 50 million, including all the different, it's used in Brave, and or Brave use it as a source list, and uBlock Origin has 10 or 15 million users and a bunch of other, maybe 50 million is an overestimate. I really don't know. It's very hard to tell. I don't have any stats anymore. It was getting between 6 to 8 million downloads a day, but I don't know what it's like anymore. We put some caching in, and I never bothered trying to look at the new logs to figure out what kind of numbers I'm getting. I get a lot of delist requests from companies. There's three main types. I get people who I added 10 years ago and the site has changed, which is fair enough. I get a lot of people who feel like they shouldn't be on the list, but really should be, because they are actually, it's mostly analytics companies and trackers and stuff like that, and they argue with me about why they shouldn't be on there. And then there's genuine mistakes that I make. Sometimes I add things I'm a bit overzealous, or yeah. DNS blocking in particular is a habit. So especially with ad blocking, you have to be careful about what you're blocking. So I do try to make sure that there's nothing on the list that will cause legitimate non-ad, non-tracker content to be blocked. And actually, some companies have used that rule to get around my policy, get around being included, because they will add stuff to their site. That means that they have legit content, which means that according to my own rules, they shouldn't be on the list. A bit of background noise there. Okay.
I think I got the right one that time.
Yeah. I do think that any software that uses the list should have some facility to add an exception easily. You shouldn't be using a piece of software that blocks stuff without a way of adding an exclusion. So if it does cause you problems, you should, uBlock Origin is a classic example. If you go to doubleclick.net and you've got my list enabled, it will show you this is blocked because of my list. And there's a button that says, let me see the site, and don't warn me about this again. It's really simple, although not simple enough apparently, because some people still don't see it. But anyway, that's another issue. Yeah, so that's the sort of note that's relevant to what I'm about to talk about. So yeah, last year I decided to add the domain t.co to my list. There was some discussion on GitHub. So there's a few different forums and areas where people talk about entries in different block lists, in particular EasyList, which is a very, I think the most popular filter list out there that's used for ad blocking. And someone complained that go.usa.gov was on there. And there was some discussion in the comments and said, why is go.usa.gov listed? It's a totally legit site. It shouldn't be, there's no reason to block it. And I said, no, well, it is a tracker. There's no reason for it to exist other than to track your user behavior. When you click a link that goes through go.usa.gov, it's invisibly tracking your link click. And the point of my list is to block this kind of these kind of servers. And they said, well, why aren't t.co and some other shorteners or bounce trackers included? And I thought, what, that's a fair point actually. I guess I hadn't added t.co before because it was sort of, it's a very popular site and it would cause people to complain. But when I thought about it, there is really no reason for it to be on there. So yeah, I added it to my list on the 11th of May last year. Yeah, here's the discussion that we had by reasoning all other URL shorteners would be added to the list. The other ones that are listed here have some other purpose. So tinyurl, Bitly, and goo.gl have other purposes. People use them to actually create shorter URLs, which I think is a kind of legit reason for having a URL shortener. When I share a Google Maps link, I don't want to send a multi-line URL to my friends. I'd rather the goo.gl, whatever. I know that, maybe it can be argued that the primary reason is just for tracking, but anyway, again, it's just me deciding this, so it's entirely subjective. But t.co doesn't seem to, I thought about it and I thought, t.co, I can't see any other reason for it. I looked into the reasons that Twitter gave for this domain existing. There's no way to opt out, which is an important part of it. You can't use or post a link on Twitter without it converting it to a t.co link. And some of the documentation talks specifically about it being used for tracking purposes. And it does, there was one reference to like, this link may be unsafe, but I had literally never seen that that warning before. And like I said, I have a fairly terrible Twitter habit. So I would have thought that, especially with all the InfoSec people I follow, I would have seen that unsafe link thing at least once before. And yeah, so I figured it's just for tracking, it should go on my list. So I added it. Yeah, so, and just to talk more specifically about bounce trackers. Bounce trackers are domains which are, when you click on a link, you get bounced through a server so that it knows that you have clicked that link. It's generally invisible. It means it records information about you. So you can get your geolocation, your IP address, the time and where you came from and things like that. Yeah. And I have a lot of them already on my list. Yeah, it's one of the most commonly things that people complain about because most of the time tracking is blocking is invisible. It happens, when you load a page, all the stuff in the background doesn't get loaded. But bounce trackers, because you go through that link, that site, when it gets blocked, you see it on the page in front of you. Yeah, it's the single most complained about thing specifically for that reason. So I'm a bit out of order here. They're the most visible, and a lot of the email newsletters trackers, like so email marketing companies like Constant Contact and MailChimp and things like that. It's a standard part of any service that they offer, that they can track link clicks and stuff like that. And people do complain because suddenly they I add it to my list, or they install uBlock Origin, and suddenly links from their newsletters stop working. I had a lady who was very upset because her knitting newsletter links stopped working, and I had a nice discussion with her. I think she was about 86, and in the end she was quite nice about it. One of the reasons I do this is because it does increase visibility to this kind of tracking. People don't know it happens, and a lot of the time when I explain to people, okay, this is what's going on, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks. And they can either then add an exclusion or, stop using my list if they don't want to, or stop using the software or anything really. But at least now they have a choice and they've made that decision themselves. Sometimes actually people do end up turning off tracking for their newsletters because they didn't even know that the newsletter owners contact me and say, hey, I've had complaints that people can't click links. And I'm like, well, it's because of link tracking that you have enabled. And they're like, oh, okay. And then turn it off, which is great. But yeah, at least it's a conscious decision rather than just passive invisible tracking that's happening. Yeah, the second most common is delisting requests from tracking companies who I always seem to be arguing with to one extent or another. Sometimes they're quite nice. They go as far as to move their tracking off a main domain so that I can just include those ones, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I got a few complaints. T.co is well, Twitter is very popular, and as I mentioned, there's no way of adding a link that doesn't go through T.co on Twitter. So some people were very upset because a lot of people use uBlock Origin and AdBlock Plus, and they were confused when they started clicking links and they stopped working. I should mention that uBlock Origin in particular has a thing called an unbreak list where they add exclusions, and they did add an exclusion. So they sort of override entries from other lists in the interests of usability. They made a judgment call on whether the filter rule is useful for the overall or not. And in this case, they said, well, maybe it will stop people using the uBlock Origin itself, and we don't want that. So they did override it. So I didn't get as many of these complaints as you might have thought, but it was definitely active for a little while. Yeah, your blocker is killing good information. One of the things about it is that often people think that I am responsible for the piece of software that they're using or the service they're using, but they find my name and Google it or something and get in touch with me directly, which is always a bit of fun. There were, yeah, some more here. There was quite a few comments on Twitter itself from varying degrees. Some people just disabled my list entirely. Some people were very angry, and yeah, some people were actually quite nice about it. They were sort of very polite and hello, sir, and yeah, just to inform you that this isn't the case, and they were, it's nice. And there was other people which were sort of actually thought about it a bit more. This one account, Evie, she's quite popular. She has, I don't know, quite a lot of followers on Twitter. And she said, okay, I mean it, I get it, and you're not wrong, but also, there's a screenshot of what it looks like when uBlock Origin has changed their block screen now. I talk about uBlock Origin a lot because it's very visible, but it's just probably the most common way for people to use my list. The single most common. There's a very long tail. Yeah, so another person said, we've thought about this a lot, and that's, for me, the ideal thing is to get people thinking about what's going on. You know, to know that this tracking is happening in the background. I really don't like it personally. It's not something that anybody asked for permission for, or many people even know about, and the worst kind of tracking, I think. Yeah, I got a few nice responses as well. So here's some of the actual discussion, varying from, you know, this one guy on the right here, he started, this is a very bad idea because it breaks Twitter. And then later on, I explain what's going on, and then like, okay, yeah, thank you. Lots of, you know, a rose there and thumbs up. So it was interesting to see the kind of range of responses. And I've got a couple more here. So thanks, didn't know about that. Thanks for the quick and helpful reaction. Very kind, you know. Yeah. So to my actual point of the whole presentation really is that for me it was kind of a fascinating situation to be in, because people install add-ons and they talk about tracking, and I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any other comments here. I can see that people have said something, so I'll get to those at the end. Yeah, it was interesting to be in this situation. First of all, my own hesitance to add it to my own list. I tried to be sort of principled about it, but I actually didn't really realize that I hadn't added it because of this reason. The irony of the whole situation is that the more popular a tracker is, the more popular a service, which is, you know, doing something that you probably don't want to happen, tracking your behavior, which might not seem like a big thing, but it actually can be very important. I think one of the things that we saw in the US recently, where data about people's you know, visits to abortion websites was being used in a particular way, like that kind of thing is can be used against you. You know, there's things that you're doing which might seem innocent at the time, can be an issue in the future. But the irony is that the more popular the tracking is, the more likely it is to have exclusions added. So almost immediately, uBlock Origin added an exclusion, and not that many people saw that block screen. But that was because it's such a popular tracker. People want things to just work, and they want the web to just work. Brave is a great product. I use Brave myself personally, but their philosophy is so Google's old philosophy was do no evil, and I think Braves is more like can't do evil. So they try and make it so that they're not in a position to, oh, they've made mistakes before, but they also want the experience of using the web to be as good as it is with Chrome. And so they put in exceptions. They make sure that things work. I want to know that is that really serving end users' intentions? I mean, it definitely is in one way, but on the other hand, maybe it's not. Maybe hiding this kind of stuff is you know, uBlock Origin is used as a wide spectrum content blocker, as it describes itself as. But people install it with the intention, with the expectation that their behavior online will become more private. But tracking from Twitter is still tracked. One of the biggest services out there that knows about people's behavior on the internet is allowed to go ahead just because it's so popular. And I think that's incredibly ironic. It's the sort of too big to fail thing, you know, where things get to the size that they get away with stuff that, you know, smaller people wouldn't. And that's really the thing that I think is worth considering about how far do we want to go with this kind of prevention. I know there's definitely a balance. There's got to be a balance, right? But where is that line? Sorry, again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So things that we do now, this is the danger of tracking stuff. it's not hypothetical. It's an actual thing. Things that we do now might be used against us in the future. The geolocation data for people visiting abortion clinics in the US has now been used in anger. And especially in areas of the world where where tracking is used in ways that are, by governments and nation state actors, it's pretty bad to think about what this kind of tracking can be used for. The thing I read recently, a quote by someone, I can't remember. It was like, I have nothing to hide, doesn't work, but I have nothing to hide at the moment. It's a long conversation. It's a high, a sort of more high level discussion. But I think that this is the, blocking of T.co and its quick exclusion is and the anger that people have as well. The kind of reaction of the internet's not working anymore. What is it that people want exactly, and how can we make them understand? The wins that I got out of the whole thing was the user awareness was the biggest thing. So yeah, adding these kind of domains does raise the user awareness, as you can see from all the reactions and responses. Even if it was only for a short time, there was enough visibility to start kind of spark a conversation and get people talking about it. And this was in May last year, and still getting a few people contact me about it because of all the different ways that the list is used. When you are consciously add an exclusion, you're saying, I am okay with this. I actually have added T.co to my own exclusion list. When I click a link on Twitter, it goes through to the target URL through T.co because I've said I'm okay with it. I'm aware of what's going on and I know what's happening. And because I know what's happening, if I see a link that's going to something dodgy that I don't want people to know about, I won't click it. I can't think what an example, but yeah, and probably shouldn't give an example. To be honest. And yeah, I think in general, the response was that people were okay with it. Most people, when I explained it, they, grudgingly or not, accepted what was happening. There was a couple of people who might have stopped using the list altogether, but then, at least that's their choice. That's pretty much it. There's some links here. I can share a link to the slides as well afterwards. So I have a podcast I do with some friends every week, and there's a link there to the bottom there where I talk a bit more about it if you want. And please don't mind the swearing if you do watch it. And yeah, that's me. Thanks. Perfect.
Thanks, Peter, for running through that. Much appreciated. Raised some interesting issues. There's a couple of things I think that I spotted in the chat, possibly more comments than anything, the ones that I saw. But let's just see. So I'll read these out loud and then you can interrupt me with anyone that will comment on. That's probably best. So Michael Richards, I wish we could filter out bounce trackers on IETF mailing lists. Chris, go on.
Sorry. So the bounce trackers and IETF mailing lists are yeah. Send me a link and I'll put it on my list. What is the bounce? I have ICANN on there as well. Go to ICANN.org. Sorry, ICANN. Well, incidentally, by the way, I also have DNS filters bounce trackers on here as well. So I don't discriminate.
Chris is surprised to see that Taboola is on the allow list on uBlock. I don't personally. This is probably my ignorance. I have no idea what Taboola is, but there you are.
You must have effective ad blocking already, and it's probably why you've not seen it.
I use AdGuard, so ad blocker.
Sorry. Chris, just to say that they have what they've done there, the rules actually say that taboola.com, the main domain, is excluded, but they have then re-added api.taboola.com, which is where a lot of the tracking URLs go. So they're trying to reduce the scope of the rule.
Glenn couldn't resist pointing out that the IP addresses on your background side appear to be personal data, but
oh my God, you're so right. Thank you.
All right, I was looking through it and I just saw, oh man, there's IP addresses there.
Where have I put them? I'll definitely remove those. Thank you.
It's whoever made your background slides. Blame Microsoft, I guess.
Oh, in the background. Oh, yeah. Okay.
The art.
I didn't even think about that. Thanks, Glenn. You made my life more difficult.
John Todd is asked about common best practices for trackers and DNS. Are there common DNS domain or naming models that will be worth duplicating or advocating as best common practice?
Yeah. There's definitely things that I've seen which are common, like hostname stuff, but I don't think there's any standard in. That's really interesting, John.
This would be something that's right in the alley of the anti-abuse working group, right? So, or if you can get good actors to consistently identify their trackers with a DNS tag of some sort, a certain subdomain or something like that, then we wouldn't have to have centralized lists. We could push it to the edge. Unlike malware, which tries to disguise itself, I think you might find some of the tracking organizations would try to be consistent, to be a good neighbor, but some won't either. So it's a difficult proposition. I'm wondering if there already is some existing work on this for DNS.
I don't think so, not to my knowledge. But with regards to the analytics companies themselves, the trackers, it's another conversation, but I know that there are people who consider themselves good actors who I don't consider entirely good actors. Plausible is a really good example of this. Plausible are an ethical analytics company, and they do go to a lot of efforts to make sure that the information that they store isn't actually PII. So they don't store raw IP addresses and things like this. So compared to Google Analytics, they are actually ethical. But if they provide ways for website owners to circumvent any end user blocking that is in place, which I think is terrible. And it really frustrates me because they should respect end users' wishes, even if, well, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If I don't want my IP address being sent to your servers for any reason, you should respect that if possible. If I want to stop a request happening, but they do things like add a first party proxy to, send the request through the website itself back to plausible servers, and they won't stop this. Something like CNAME cloaking, if anybody's familiar with that, but which they disabled because it wasn't effective. Anyway, sorry, long discussion.
There's a whole GDPR-based discussion there, but we won't go into that on this call. But yes. Vicky sums up what you said as,
yes.
So people want cookies and cross-site tracking except when they don't.
Yep, that's it, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I suppose it could just be a comment on them, people.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
So I had a genuine question. So just curious, how much of your time does this take? The maintenance of the list?
Not much.
Really?
I'm pretty lazy. I automate as much as I can of it. I have a little admin thing. A lot of the additions to the list these days are from end users, from people, and I ask them to provide evidence, so it's pretty quick to review. It used to be whenever I went to a page and I saw an ad, I would look up where it came from and then add it to my list. Or then if I saw some, I'd look at the network list and just look at what wasn't being blocked and add it. So yeah, not very much of my time. I am very lazy.
So I have a question. This is Vicky. Sorry, I didn't put it in the chat. It just occurred. I haven't really been following the evolution of STIR. That's the spam blocking for voice over IP calls.
Oh, cool.
But obviously, telephony, maybe not voice over IP, but telephony carriers in general are a lot more regulated. They have all different rules. Do you know anything about, or does anybody on the call know how the block lists are going to work for that?
I don't myself, actually. It's the first I've heard of Stir.
Are they block lists or are they validation of origin caller ID?
There are definitely some people on this call that should know about Stir and indeed Shaken, which if they're not too rusty.
Validation of origin ID. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, okay. So Michael Richardson says it's just validation of origin ID. Okay. All right. So forget that.
Okay.
Yeah. Hadn't thought that's not a valid question.
Well, it sort of is, because it gets back to the question of, it's the same thing. Is there a best common practice for authentication of inbound identity? And so if your trackers are all under the same name or under a name that identifies themselves as trackers, or at least identifies themselves as trusted, I suppose, that would be different, or that would do some of the same things that Stir and Shaken do. But I think I'll probably short circuit Peter's objection there, and then a lot of these companies aren't going to, unless there's laws against tracking, they're not going to try to add themselves to some sort of common model to de-include themselves from end user clicks. So I don't think it's that effective.
Well, that's the whole problem, isn't it? Always we can create technical standards or compliance models for people who will play nice, but then we keep getting these folks coming in from the side who don't play nice, but offer discounts and better business models for people who want to not exactly play by the rules. Sorry, Peter, was that what you were about to say?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that. So my feeling was basically that for a long time, there's too many bad faith actors out there. And that's why I was quite strict about adding people to my list. But I actually think this is changing slightly in the last year or two, actually, with a lot of the work that the W3C has done with, in the privacy interest group and global privacy controls and this kind of stuff. It's taken a long time, but I think it's becoming more regulated and more industrialized. I don't know. I think it is changing slowly. Oh, how do you use the list? So if you go, here is my homepage with the homepage of the list. And yes, you go to the terrible. Thank you, Vicky, for reinforcing that. You didn't need to say terrible. Okay. Yeah, you go to the terrible website and you can choose your options about what you want to view and download it there. There's pieces of software like Little Snitch and DNSFilter and uBlock Origin, where you can just install it. uBlock Origin, if you install it, my list is enabled by default. There's a bunch of different filter lists you can choose from, and mine is one of them, so you can disable it if you want. Same with AdBlock Plus and other things. So it's good as a web tracking, web blocker, web ad blocker, but you can also have it. It's great for preventing telemetry that comes out of chatty IoT devices as well, I think. TVs and things like that. Okay, I think that's it. I hope that was good enough for explanation, but feel free to get in touch if anybody has any other questions.
So that was an interesting point for me. So telemetry from IoT devices implies using the list at DNS level for the local network, doesn't it? Whereas uBlock is using the list in the client browser.
Yeah, so a popular piece of software is called Pi-hole, which is a little designed to be installed on Raspberry Pi. And that has my list as available pretty easily or by default or something like that. Yeah, Michael, if you try going to doubleclick.net, you'll probably see my name come up. If you've got my list enabled, it will say this is doubleclick.net has been blocked because of my list. You're welcome, Vicky. It's nice to be able to feel like I'm doing something useful.
And hopefully you'll be inundated with offers to redo the website.
Oh no, I'm scared of it. I'm scared of touching it because I'll have to redo the whole thing.
Right, brilliant. Well, thank you for that. That was very interesting. I think it's sort of triggered some interesting side conversations as well. So hopefully that will continue. Right, let me go back to screen sharing. So put the slide back on so you'll see where we were. All right, so I'm just going to quickly just so keep an eye on the time. Just give you a quick reminder of some of the sort of recent developments. And the main one, which I sort of pinged an email out just before Christmas, is confirmation that the DNS4 EU project is going ahead. You hopefully will be aware that Whalebone and ZZNIC, amongst others, part of a consortium that was awarded the EU grant. So we'll be sort of beginning to sort of work through their sort of deployment plans, and there is in fact a press conference on tomorrow, as I say Tuesday, but that's tomorrow, which was scheduled just before Christmas, to really sort of give the sort of formal announcement to back up the press release, which was sort of sent out the week before Christmas. I've already spoken to the team, and we'll see whether we can get them to come on the call possibly next Monday, because I know there's some interest from some participants on this call to see whether and how they may be able to sort of become part of the initiative. So as soon as I have confirmation if Whalebone and or some of the other consortium members can join, I'll let you know. Failing that, I'll certainly sort of share some of the highlights from the press conference for those of you that aren't able to make the call. So I think it's in like 10 o'clock Central European time tomorrow morning, which might be a bit early for certainly for those of you in the States, at least, if nowhere else. So that was the main thing. Other things, just quickly, a reminder of the RIPE DNS task force is looking for volunteers with a sort of suggested deadline of the 15th of this month. So if you want to take part in the DNS Resolver BCP task force, then just make that known via the mailing list by the 15th, if you could. Speaking of DNSFilter, Peter did a piece, I think it was a few weeks ago now, on the slow adoption of DNS security measures by enterprises, which may be of interest. And the DNS OAuth is kicking off a Mastodon community on DNS, which they believe is the first one focused on DNS on that platform. So there's some initial details via the link you'll see on the slide, with more details coming sort of in the next few weeks, I believe. Again, I'll see if I can get Dinesh or one of the team on to share some more detail about that when they're able. Just seeing if there's anything else that's worthy of mention. Yeah, well, there's a piece on the state of tracking, since we've just been talking about that, so some of you may find that of interest, as well as a number of predictions for the new year, which are sort of doing a bit of fun, worth a read. Of course, we're already so in the run into a number of events. So start of next month, we got FOSDEM in Brussels, NANOG, and OARC in Atlanta, and then before you know it, it will be March, and we'll be flying off to Yokohama. So plenty of stuff coming up. Number of deadlines kicking in for calls for papers and workshop proposals. The OARC one has just passed, unless it's been extended again. I don't believe it has, but if anyone from the program committee thinks otherwise, shout out.
It has not.
Okay. And in fact, today the NANOG deadline passes, and you'll see some of those coming up. Also, with the early bird registration doesn't close until towards the end of this month, so there's still time to register, taking advantage of early bird. And don't forget that OR takes place immediately after NANOG in the same venue in Atlanta, to facilitate people attending both, should they wish to. So in terms of our next couple of calls, as I just mentioned, we will be talking about DNS for EU in some form next week, and the week after, Peter will come back to talk about Rule 53 again, give an update on that, which is always fun to hear. I'm sure you've already got that finished and ready to roll, Peter. Won't we leave it to the last?
Yeah. Absolutely not. I'm fully prepared.
Bear in mind, I submitted mine 2 essays with I think 45 minutes before the deadline this morning for my LLM. So hey ho.
Well done. Yeah, there's going to be quite. I'm going to add a whole new section for DNS over. So DNS over, SMS and Signal and all sorts of weird things. So that's the major thing.
We call it docs, but with 1 X, not 2. Otherwise, that could be confusing. Right. So that brings us on to any other business that anyone wants to share. I know there've been a few people moves amongst other things. So anyone want to jump on with anything else? I'm sorry, Chris, I hadn't seen that in the chat, but I have now about, so we get MNOT on to talk about stuff that he posted a few days ago, which I think I read. A good idea. I will reach out to him. Time zones might be a challenge, but we'll see. See what can be done. So anything else anyone wants to raise? Any sort of people moves people want to mention or anything like that? Or are we done for the day? I have the impression we might be done. In which case, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you in particular, Peter, for taking us through some of the nuances of blocking, content filtering, etc. Certainly interested to hear about that and some of the interaction. Quite impressed you got 50 million users. It's not a bad claim to fame for a free service. Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and look forward to chatting this time next week about DNS for EU and maybe a few other things as well. So bye, everyone, and see you all then. Thanks all.